These home builders are sending a major recession warning to the US economy that you all need to be paying attention to right now, because something is happening here in the home building space that's only happened 6 other times in US history, and every other time it's happened, we've had a housing crash and a recession. And I want to show you folks what we're seeing from these builders. We're seeing lots of homes that are completed or about to be completed for sale. The builder inventory is skyrocketing at a historically high rate. And today, according to the US Census Bureau, there's 9.3 months of supply right now on builder lots, which is one of the highest rates of all time. According to Reuters, we're at now a 16-year high in housing supply from home builders. And this is especially true here in the South. You can actually see that in the South, we now have more new homes for sale today than we did at the peak of the 2006 bubble before the biggest crash of all time. And so you have to wonder, everyone, if we're at a 16-year high in builder inventory and the South is even higher than it was in 06, just how bad can this downturn get? And what does it mean for the US economy, everyone? Because as you can see here, all the other times that builder supply went up this high, we had a recession shortly thereafter, with the exception of 2022, which was like a near recession. But almost perfectly, when builder supply gets to this level, when the construction gets this high and the inventory increases, the economy hits a downturn in the next 6 to 12 months. And one of the ways that this is going to happen, everyone, is through layoffs in construction. Because the more new homes we have sitting empty and looking for a buyer, and the more the builder inventory increases, the fewer permits they're going to pull in the future, and the less need they're going to have for construction workers. And so don't be surprised if construction is one of the first shoes to drop in terms of employment in the second half of 2024. And I'm not saying that to scare anyone. I'm saying that to just merely report to you what's going on here in the housing market. And of course, in particular, this is a big deal down here in Florida, everyone, because as I've been reporting to you over the last couple weeks, Florida's housing market has entered a downturn. The prices here have started going down. The inventory levels are skyrocketing. And Florida, in some ways, is leading the nation, along with Texas, in terms of this housing downturn. So here in Palm Beach County, where I am right now, you can see the active inventory on the market has absolutely skyrocketed over the last year to year and a half. We're now back to pre-pandemic inventory levels. At the same time, sellers are cutting the price at the highest rate on record here in Palm Beach County. And so you say to yourself, what does that mean for the future of home prices? This is actually one of the most expensive markets in Florida to buy. Lots of wealthy people come down to Palm Beach County. Lots of New Yorkers actually have invaded Palm Beach over the last 4 years since the pandemic. And they're coming with cash, they're coming with bags of cash, and they're buying up a lot of these homes, or at least they have been buying up a lot of these homes. I actually just talked to someone who works in construction here at this site, and he said the demand here is still good. He says they're still pulling permits, but the reason he says is because a majority of the buyers actually come with cash. Majority of the buyers are over the age of 55, moving down from the Northeast, coming with cash. And so they're not as exposed to an economic downturn. They're not as exposed to higher mortgage rates. And so their demand is more steady. However, in spite of that, the inventory levels here are still skyrocketing. And they're also skyrocketing in a lot of other nearby parts of Florida. If we go up to Port St. Lucie, we can see the inventory is way up. If we go down to Broward County, we can see the inventory is way up. And we can see that the median list prices are also going down. And so, there's some people out there who, they come up to me actually on the street. Down here in Florida, a lot of people have come up to me and they say, hey, Nick, I watch your videos. And, sometimes they say, hey, when's the crash going to happen? I know you've been talking about the crash for the last 2 or 3 years. I want to buy a house, right? And I would answer, like, in Florida right now and in Texas, in these areas where the builders are most active, this downturn has already started. However, the thing you need to understand is that a housing crash, a housing downturn, takes on average 5 years. If you look at historical housing downturns, they take 5 years to play out, from peak price to bottom price. And in some ways, the housing cycle can even be even longer than that when you talk about peaks in buyer demand and lows in buyer demand. So for instance, in the last housing downturn, prices peaked in 2007 and they kept dropping and didn't bottom until 2012. And so there was a lot of people in the last housing downturn around, 07, even in the beginning of 08, who were saying like, oh, this is no big deal. They're saying the prices have barely dropped. There's not going to be a broader collapse. There's not going to be a broader recession. And then boom, it happened. Similarly, in the early 1990s, there was a national housing downturn, particularly in the states like Massachusetts and California. Home prices went down for 6 or 7 years in that early 90s downturn. So what I want you guys to think about in terms of assessing the housing market is that it moves slowly. It moves slowly when it comes to prices, especially prices going down, and it can take a long time for sellers to get out of their own way and lower prices to where they need to be so they can sell their house. But one thing I would really encourage you guys to pay attention to if you're a home buyer or investor is pay attention to the differences in the local markets across America. Because we're in what's called a bifurcated housing market right now, where we have an unquestionable downturn beginning to play out in Florida, in Texas, in Tennessee, in Arizona, in Utah and Colorado. In these states here in red on Reventure app, you can see the inventory is spiked and the home price forecasts are below 50. The price forecasts are suggesting values are going down in these states into the future. However, if we go to other parts of America, like the Northeast, the Midwest, and even some parts of California, you can see we still have a shortage. We still have very low inventory, and we can actually have positive home price forecasts on Reventure app for these areas in the Northeast, Midwest, and California. So make sure to go to Reventure app at the end of this video. But first, folks, I gotta tell you, it is hot down here in Florida today. It is about 97 degrees. At least my car said it was 97, and the humidity is really, really high. I've been down in Florida for the last 2 or 3 weeks. This is definitely the hottest day it's been so far. I'm gonna have to drink a lot of water. You have to drink a lot of water if you're in Florida. Like, I've been walking around Miami. I normally drink a couple bottles of water a day, 3 bottles of water. No, you gotta double that if you're in Florida, because you just get dehydrated instantaneously. I know a lot of you who have moved to Florida or looking to move to Florida, you know about the heat. I think it's actually something that's causing a lot of people to leave at this point, is how hot Florida is. I think a lot of people came down during the pandemic from maybe a little cooler, colder states for the warm weather down here, and then they stayed a couple summers and they're like, oh my goodness, it is hot and sticky. The best analogy that someone gave me, I think, for what it's like to live in Florida during the summer, if you don't mind me here just explaining this, is they said, imagine taking a shower and then not drying off and putting your clothes on and going outside. That's what it feels like. You're constantly sticky, you're constantly wet. So definitely something to think about if you're looking at moving to Florida, if you can tolerate that heat. In the meantime, I want to show you guys some of these homes here in this builder site. This is a builder called Coulter Homes here in Palm Beach County. And they're a higher end builder. You know, it seems like they build a nicer product. The price points of these homes are definitely kind of expensive. I mean, you're seeing $700,000 up to $1 million for some of these homes. And we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. We're on the western side of Palm Beach County. So to pay that type of price to live in a kind of more rural, secluded location that doesn't really offer you any land, to me, that's probably too expensive. And if you look in this zip code here on Reventure app, you can see, oh boy, inventory is spiked, price cuts have spiked. When you see that combination of spiking inventory and spiking price cuts, it's important you understand that's telling you that the market's turning down. And I think it's just very important for you guys to understand that, because there's so much mixed messaging in the housing market right now. You know, depending on what day and what website you read a news headline, you could be reading a headline that's bullish on the housing market or bearish on the housing market. And, you know, the other day, Reuters came out with a headline, housing supply hits 16-year high from builders, new home sales plummet. That's a bearish headline. Comparatively, there's other headlines, like from a recent Bank of America study that's talking about how Bank of America thinks home prices are going to keep going up until 2026, and that they say there's actually a lot of demand and no supply. So that's bullish on the housing market. And so if you're reading these news stories or watching YouTube or just looking at Instagram, how do you as a buyer or a homeowner make sense of what's happening in the market? I mean, it can be very confusing. And the answer to that question is you have to look at the data for your city and state and zip code. Once you do that, once you understand your inventory trends, price cut trends, and how overvalued home prices are in your market, you have a much clearer indication of what's actually happening in the market. You're not going to be as jerked around by whatever kind of the narrative is in the news that day. You're going to have much clearer insight and be able to make a much more educated decision about what ultimately, folks, is like a massive financial investment. Buying a house, whether it's for 800 grand or 400 grand, it's the biggest financial decision most of you will ever make. And a lot of you are putting your hard-earned savings on the line with a down payment on these homes. And you don't want to lose that down payment. You don't want to see your equity wiped away. And so make sure to do the research on the trends in your market and zip code before you make a decision to buy or not to buy. Because understanding the trends, it's going to save you a lot of money in the long run. It could potentially make you a lot of money in the long run. But back to the economy, everyone, because in the end, the housing market's kind of a function of the economy and vice versa. So what's going on in the US economy right now? And what does this huge surge in builder supply mean for the economy? Well, as I said in the beginning, every other time the home builder months of supply, which is calculated by dividing the homes for sale divided by the sales, every time it's gone over 9 in the last 50, 60 years, we've had a recession, except for 2022, which I believe was a bit of an outlier scenario due to how much money the government printed during the pandemic. Except for 2022, every other time the builder supply has gotten this high, we've had a recession. And the reason is, everyone, because the builders, they're kind of a leading indicator for the economy, right? When the builders go crazy and they start pulling permits like crazy, it's a signal that like there's excess supply being built, right? And then all of a sudden the demand drops off and then you're like, oh man, the builder's like, oh man, I don't have enough customers. I don't have enough demand. We got to start cutting the prices. And builders have cut prices already 10 to 12% from peak. I think they're going to cut prices by more into the future. But really the thing to think about is like, there's lots of other segments of the economy behaving in the same way as the builders. There's a lot of manufacturers who ramped up production for, whatever their business was during the pandemic. There's lots of new restaurants that opened during the pandemic. The supply of a lot of different things in society, a lot of different businesses expanded significantly during the pandemic. And now we're seeing the demand drop off. The retail sales have been flat over the last couple months. They've barely grown actually over the last 2 years. The consumer sentiment's going down. And so now this excess supply is intersecting with a decline in demand. And that's ultimately what produces a recession as well as deflationary forces. I think we could see some deflationary forces in the economy throughout the second half of the year, particularly here in housing, particularly also in manufacturing, because all that excess supply was built. And so for those of you who think that somehow we've dodged a recession or we're not going to experience a recession, I wouldn't be so sure. The metrics are definitely still pointing in that direction, whether it's the builder months of supply, the consumer sentiment, the retail sales slipping. We just saw today that a company like Walgreens completely slashing their earnings outlook. Their stock is down 20%. We have a lot of restaurants giving big warnings about the economy and consumer behavior. I mean, things are definitely slowing in the economy. The question is, does that slowing turn into an outright downturn in the second half of the year? I mean, I think the odds are pretty good for that, everyone. I'm not going to guarantee it, but consumers are saddled with so much debt. The credit card debt's still really high, and the interest rates are choking off economic activity. So don't be surprised if we see a worsening economy in the second half of this year, which causes home prices to go down, especially in the South, where the building is absolutely crazy. And one thing that I think is super important, everyone, is as this economic downturn plays out, as the builder pipeline grows even bigger, you got to understand what's going on in your market, in your city. And so use the same data that I'm using here to track the market. If you're a buyer, investor, or seller, you're going to really want to understand the trends in your market. So go to www.reventure.app right now, sign up for a premium membership. The data accessible with the premium membership is really going to give you insight into the housing market and the trends that you're not going to get anyplace else. You're going to have a firm idea of whether you're in a buyer's or seller's market and where prices should be heading in your city over the next year. And just for a little personal update on myself, everyone, I'm still down here in Florida. I'm actually thinking of opening up an office here in Florida for Reventure app down here in the Miami area. Haven't made any firm decisions on that. But one thing's for sure, Florida, despite its downturn, is where most of the interest in real estate is. It's where a lot of the realtors and investors are. And so I'm thinking potentially I should be more around that scene in that crowd. You guys can let me know what you think in the comments section below, as well as what part of Florida you think I should open up the Reventure app office in. Until next time, this is Nick from Reventure. Talk to you later.